Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Jon Witt, and this is a handstand prep class. So if you're new to handstanding, I'll give you layers of practice to eventually get up into a handstand, whether you're kicking. Some people are actually more comfortable with not using the wall, so that's something that you could try today. I don't do a whole lot of handstands in the bulk of the class. So I do a lot of fundamental things to help build up upon that. So if you're out of practice or you're not as conditioned, you could always just kind of watch and listen. Try to give as much information as I can to help in the process of it. It does take a while, and if you're a little bit more not so driven on when you achieve it, I believe it would come quicker. You know, you obviously have to put the work into getting a handstand, but if you're really, really uptight about getting it within 30 days, it may not happen. And I've said this in previous classes, if you're building and you're using techniques to actually achieve it, you'll get closer and closer to it. And if you're just starting out, I wouldn't spend more than 2-3 times a week the first month. And then I would build it up where, you could eventually do it every day or split it up, where you're doing it, say in the morning and the afternoon, or the afternoon and the evening, or morning and evening. The weaker you are, the more you would want to stretch it out to believe, to help, because it can be a lot of taxing mentally and physically. So I hope the class has been helping. This class will continue in February. I do have another live class, and that's on Saturdays, and that's from 9 to 10. That's a Hatha yoga class. So I won't be teaching that in February, but in March, I'll resume that class on Saturdays. I have a training in February for yoga teachers and therapists, and if you're just a yoga enthusiast, it's a great training. It's through the Prema Yoga Institute. It's a 100-hour training. If you're interested in it, all my information on my website, or my information on my website has the training. And then you can also go to premayogainstitute.com and find out more about it if you're interested in training more in depth in February with me, my friend, co-founder, or she's the founder of Prema, Dana Slam. And there's some really great teachers as well that's included in the process of that training. So I'm going to start in all 4 position. I'm going to come onto my hands and my knees, and then with my hands underneath my shoulders, my hands are turned out. So let's say you don't have a lot of strength in the hands, or you don't have a lot of flexibility in the hands. It's quite okay to have your hands turned out when you're on your hands, whether it be plank, down dog, up dog. Just a little bit more complicated to balance in terms of like with a handstand. But I've seen people with their hands turned out completely in handstands. I've seen people turn their hands completely in. So there's things that you want to keep to in terms of principles, but they're really depending on your skeletal system and your level of strength. You may have to change it outside of like the golden rule or like the book version of like a handstand, right? So I'm going to come back into the middle, and what I'm going to do is I'm just letting my chest drop down in between my arms. So this is what people do in the handstand, which makes it way more complicated. So in handstands, you want to press through the hands and protract through the shoulders. So use your fingertips, spread your shoulders apart, keep this really consistent, especially if you're new with it. And then after a while, you don't really have to push incredibly hard, because you'll know what type of strength to use. But I'm going to slowly let the chest kind of descend down, and then I'm going to press up again. And then just as you're up in this top position with your arms straight and your shoulders wide, I'm not trying to round too much through my back. I may be, that's something that I've done before in the past. Not like technically wrong, but it's just, you really just want the shoulders to widen out. Rib cage can be in a little bit, right, because you're in a hollow position, and then just let that relax. And like I said, this could be your variation of a handstand, right? Say you were, advanced in age, but you had an interest. This could be your version of handstand. So I'm going to come back into the middle One more time, I'm pressing up. And then as I press up, again, I'm widening out through the shoulders. And then if you don't necessarily know if you have this or not, just let it relax a little bit and then press up. So if you lose it, you already have it, right? And if you didn't have it where you were relaxed, it kind of always feels the same. So I like going into poses and then out so that you can integrate better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up into plank pose. I'm going to keep that protraction through the shoulders. So as I come up, I'm lifting the knees, I'm pushing the hands into the floor, I'm broadening my shoulders, I'm broadening my back, creating more of a hollow position through the front of my body, which is your handstand, right? And then I'm going to go up into a down dog. I'm going to pedal my legs out. As I pedal my legs out, just to stretch out the back of the body. You don't need to have an incredible forward bend for handstanding, but it helps. You know, if you have, the better your forward bend is, the easier it is to invert in, whether it be headstand or handstand. So I'm going to come forward into plank, and then in plank, I'm going to come down on my knees. I will do just some push-ups, not a lot. I'm just going to do 5. The speed of them, the faster you do them, the easier they are, to be honest. So if you want to get stronger, you could say you have already a push-up, you know, slow down the cadence, try to go for 6 seconds or 8 seconds down. And then maybe you can't press up, you can come to all fours and do it. I'll do that, the first one like that, right? So I'm not going to do a full push-up. So I'm coming up into plank. I could be on my knees, and I'm going to slowly, this whole time I'm pushing, right? I'm pushing into the floor. My shoulders are broad. My ribs are in. And then I'm all the way down. And you could just come up into elbows and extension, which is Sphinx pose. But if you're up for some push-ups, push back to all fours and come up into plank again. So I'm going to slowly lower, not as slow. I'm just going to do some push-ups. But if you couldn't do push-ups, do the eccentric push-ups, right? So I'm going to lower about 3, maybe 4 seconds, and then I'm pressing up. You know, you can go, you know, I went about the height of my elbows. If you do want to go lower, you can. All the way up, slowly. Keep pushing, and then up, and then one more time, I'm going to slowly come down. Elbows stay in push-ups. Glutes are strong. Abdomen is strong. And then back up to the top. And then when you come up, just turn the hands, if you can, back towards the knees. So my hands are turned back. This is to rotate the shoulders out. So I'm just moving the weight around. And then as I move the weight around, trying to stretch out the forearms, stretch out the wrists. This is very similar to the handstand. It's like wheel pose. So if, you know, those are difficult positions, you may have to prep the hands more, right? If you have a lot of experience with yoga, vinyasa yoga, or calisthenics, you might not need as much preparatory work for the wrists, the connective tissues of the hands. So I'm going to come back into the middle, and I'm turning the hands in. And this is just to get the shoulders to rotate in, which will help rotate them out. So I think the more difficult the variation, stimulating the variation, the better the variation is. You know, if you're just beginning, find the easiest variation. And then over time, you can make it more complex. So I'm going to bring the backs of my hands to the floor, and my hands are tense, and I'm just pulling back a little bit. So for me, I have less flexibility in my left wrist for most things. So I'm just adding more weight into my left hand, right? Just to, over time, you know, create more space within the wrist and the forearm. And then I'm going to come up, back up into plank. So I'm going to lift the knees up off the floor. I'm going to reach back to the heels. I'm hollowed out. And, you know, as you get stronger in this, you can start to be more forward with the shoulders. This is to help load up the hands. It's not like if you're doing 2 hours or 3 hours of yoga, you wouldn't want to do it that way, right? But for the sake of getting more used to having more weight in your hands, this could be your handstand.
again, it's not something that you'd want to do all that much within a practice, right? But push the floor away from you, go up into a down dog, pull back through the thighs, pedal the legs out, right? And then what I'm going to do is come down on my knees and sit back on my heels a little bit, just to stretch out my feet. So I intertwine in most classes some lower body mobility, which, if I'm doing strictly upper body stuff, I'm definitely working on my lower body on those days too. I'm not just, it's not just one or the other, so to speak. So I'm going to untuck the toes and then sit back on the feet. And you don't have to sit back as much as I am. I'm going to come back where I'm going to take my knees up off the floor. I'm going to slowly lower all the way to the floor, and then I'm going to come up onto my elbows. So if you don't have a deeper back bend, this is a great place to start. The more mobile you are through the upper body, the easier it is to handstand. For instance, like if you were a male practitioner and you just lifted weights your whole life and you just, can't be in a full overhead position, back extensions and, obviously shoulder work would help that type of person. But I'm going to come up onto my hands, but I want to keep my hips down on the ground. So I'm going to come up just a little bit higher than, say, that Sphinx pose. So I'm up and my glutes are strong, but I want to keep my hips down. So there's more extension in the upper back. And then what I'm going to do is come forward and down. I'm happy if you hold it longer, but for those of you that don't have as much flexibility, shorter holds probably will work better for you. But you'd want to do it multiple times, right? You don't want to just do it, it's what people do in the park. They'll stretch for like 20 seconds, but then they won't revisit the same stretch or the same position, right? They'll just move on. You want to do it multiple times. So I'm going to come forward and come down. And then one more time, I'm going to curl up. And, it's just more leverage if I come up higher. It's not necessarily better. If I'm moving the weight around, I could be moving my head. So you got a lot of tension in your neck. And then bringing yourself down. And then as you come down, I'm going to be on the tops of my feet. I'm going to push straight up into the top of my plank. Right? And then I'm going to tuck the toes and go up into a down dog. So I'm walking my feet forward, middle of my mat. I'm walking my hands back towards my feet. And then I'm going to slowly roll up, but I'm purposely taking my arms or my hands off the floor. So I'm predominantly rounding through the upper back. And then as I curl up, I'm all the way up to standing. Now, have your hands on your hips. Stick your butt out. Typically what people do in handstands is that they're too far in this sway. So tuck the tailbone underneath. You'll feel your abdomen engage. And then just sink the chest in a little bit. And then you can straighten through the legs. So I'm taking the arms up overhead. And I'm just holding this position. If I look to my hands in handstands, this is what creates the sway in your back. So when you kick up, it's obviously okay to do that. But I would get away from looking past the fingertips. It's a common mistake that people make. So come up on the toes, lift the heels off the floor. Take a couple deep breaths here. And then you can slowly lower the heels and you can take the arms down. So I'm going to do some lunging. I've said it before. I say it in every class, this class. The stronger your legs are, the easier it is to kick up. So I believe in static holds, but the more frequency you go into a pose, like repetitions, it's more taxing. The legs will get stronger from that. It's more conditioning, right? So my right foot is forward. Actually, I'm going to set my left foot forward. I always like to start with my weaker leg. I'm not in this really big stance, but I'm bringing my knee forward past the line of my toes on purpose, right, to strengthen the front of the leg. It does strengthen the hamstring a bit. It's more front of the quad is really what you're isolating. So I'm coming up. I want to drive the knee forward, and this will help with Cossack stretches, squatting, overall well-being of your knee. So let's say you go to a certain point and you're like, that's as far as range of motion I have. Well, that's okay, right? But over time, you'll be able to increase the angle. Again, it's very, very good for the knees with moderation, right? I'm coming up. I'm not going to do a ton of these. I'm going to come forward, moving it forward, keeping my body upright, and then blasting through the left foot coming up. I'm going to step my right foot forward and then stepping my left foot back. And when I come forward and I come down, I'm getting the knee forward so that there's real contact of the calf muscle and the hamstring. And then I'm bringing it up. If you're not using your arms to balance, try to relax through your arms or shoulders. You know, if you really wanted to be more physical, have your arms overhead, right? You could do it this way. So I'm coming forward, right? Tailbone is down, abdomen is in. I'm bringing it up, coming forward, right? Extending, reach through the arms. Try to get the shoulders up to the ears if you're a person that has your arms overhead. One more time, I'm coming forward, coming down, and then I'm bringing it back up, and then I'm bringing my arms down. So I'm going to step into the middle of my mat, just so that you can see me better, but I'm going to grab my left foot with my left hand, and I'm pulling it up, and this is passive stretching of the quad. Just going to do it for a few seconds. You can hold it longer. And then I'm going to bring it down. Just for the sake of the video, I'm trying to strengthen more of the hamstring. So it's not so much to stretch it out, it's to get more into the hamstring here. So I'm taking my foot up and I'm trying to bring my foot to my hand. So I could easily grab the foot if you have that flexibility, but try to make it more difficult where you're always trying to get the leg closer to the hip. So very good for the hamstrings again, the knee. If you're a runner, these are really strong muscles, but if you're not a runner, they're generally speaking, they're pretty weak. So I'm holding just a passive stretch. That's what you need more than that's what you do, you know? When I'm teaching a public class, I always say, like, when you only have a short amount of time, what you should be practicing is what you need more of, not necessarily what's familiar or easy. You know, practice things that you're weak at, like balance as an example. If you're really struggling with balance, practice balance more frequently. So I'm consistently lifting my foot to my hand, and it may cramp, right? It may cramp for you. And then I'm bringing the foot down. And then as I'm bringing it down, I'm going to come back into working a little bit with the wrists. And we'll work a little bit on just the position of the handstand in terms of the line. And we'll try our first one, Like I said, a lot of it is conditioning. So you may think you're strong to hold a handstand. If you can't hold a handstand longer than 10 seconds, like in the middle of the room, and it's usually just building more strength in the body. I mean, the line helps. Definitely, the line helps. But you got to get stronger to hold that, right? So I'm going to come back down on my hands and press through the hands and round through the shoulders. Each time I'm doing this, the memory of it is really going to help. But just come up on the toes and take the arms up. Try to get the shoulders to the ears. So the combination of pushing and scapula protraction and scapula elevation really, really makes a difference. As you get more experience, maybe you don't need this high elevation, but it makes a world of difference in, because I see people and they really don't push enough. They could be pushing 80, 90 more % than what they're pushing, right? So when you come onto your hands, I'm going to do more of like a plank walk forward or just an elevated hip position, just because I know that not everybody can do a handstand, right? So I'm sitting on my feet, and I say this from time to time, you really have to get yourself to push more. So kind of, not that you have to, get, rah or whatever, but you are pushing more than you really need to than say like plank, right? It's very different than plank. So my hands are down, at least I want my index fingers to point forward or slightly out more. But if they start to turn in, can make things too much for the wrist for some people, right? So I'm pressing through the floor, right? And I'm going to lift up on the tops of my feet, and I want to bring my hips forward so that I'm loading up the hands, right? So I'm going to push through the hands. I'm going to lift the hips, right? And then I'm going to come down. So you could technically hold this for 20, 30 seconds, but I'm going to go up and down for a number of reasons for you, right? So I'm going to push through the hands, lift the hips, slowly, slowly, slowly lower, right? Take a breath, push through the hands, arms are straight, lift the hips, press, 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 and then coming down. You know, it could be in socks, and you could go from plank to sliding forward. Those are really, really great. Press through the hands, round through the shoulders, lift through the hips, slowly, slowly lower. One more time, you're going to press through the hands and elevate through the hips. So press, 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 press through the fingertips, and then lower back down with the knees. So we're going to come down onto the belly and just practice one handstand line. I think this is a great drill because it'll embed more of a straight line. So just come to plank, slowly, slowly lower, and then just bring your feet together and just bring your arms like in a cactus position, or support your head if you needed to, of course, right? But try to fill your lower back up by bringing your belly in. And then you're going to feel your ribs, or at least I do, my ribs push into the floor. So when you get into chest to wall, those types of drills, you want to keep your ribs from touching the wall, right? You want to keep them away. So here, I'm bringing it in. I'm really trying to get the ribs away from the floor, and I'm lifting my low back up, and I'm squeezing my glutes, right? And then I'm relaxing. It's a very basic version. I'm going to take my arms forward and up off the floor, if I can do this, right? So when I'm here, I'm keeping my head down, I'm elevating the arms, just like a handstand, right? But I'm trying to get my body in more of a line that is comparable to, you know, a good straight line in a handstand. So keep the ribs in, keep pulling the belly in, keep lifting the arms away from the floor, and then bringing it down. And that was probably about 20, 30 seconds. Not incredibly long of a hold, but a good place to start. And like I said, when you can only hold something for 20, 30 seconds, do 5, 10 repetitions or 10 sets, right? And that could, you know, don't have a lot of time, just start with 5, but do 5 like later in the day, something like that, right? So I'm going to roll onto my back, and then I'm just going to do some dead bug. I'll do a Navasana first, or just like a low boat, a hollow position. So I'm here, my legs are up. I'm going to take my arms overhead, and then I'm bringing my legs forward. So really bring the front of your body in, hold this, and again, say you can only hold it for 10 seconds. You come down, take a 60-second break or a 2-minute break, and then do it again. And that could be your practice, right? Take 3 deep breaths, keep the ribs in, extend through the arms, right? And then bring the knees back over the hips, bring the arms down, and you can just rest. Just a few breaths. So roll yourself up, roll yourself back, right? Roll yourself up, slowly roll down, lower back comes to the floor, ribs are in, you know, as you're here, stay up, bring yourself all the way down. Take your hands straight up towards the ceiling, have your knees bent, take your right arm overhead and your left leg forward. So keep the belly in, keep the ribs in, bring the hands up, knees over the hips, take the left arm overhead, the right leg forward, ribs are in, bring it back up, right arm overhead, left leg forward, ribs in, Hands over the shoulders, knees over the hips, right leg forward, left leg is in. Keep the belly in, keep the ribs in. Bring the hands over the shoulders, knees over the hips. Bring your feet down. So roll onto your abdomen. As you roll onto your abdomen, have your hands just underneath your shoulders. Curl up into a low cobra. Right? Press up. Keep your hips down. Maybe you're not all the way up, which is okay. The longer your arms, the more the arms could be forward. And even if you had shorter arms, right, it might be just too much leverage on the lower back, right? But keep extending through the upper back and then bringing yourself forward and down. Tuck the toes, lift straight up to the plank. Press, 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 and then come back down on the knees. So, it depends on the person. Kicking up can be easier for people. Walking up the wall can be easier. If it's strength that you need, get in the habit of, walking up the wall. Did these, I've been doing these ever since the pandemic, for people, obviously I practice it myself, but maybe you can't walk up all the way, and that's what we're going to start with. And I'm not going to walk up and hold it, which is really what's hard about it. So getting in the practice of walking up, but then walking out isn't as risky, but it's really beneficial. So what you do is you do everything that I've mentioned, right? Protract through the shoulders, elevate the scapula, and maybe don't walk up as much, but walking on your hands is really rocking, like leaning, so that you can pick. When I lean to my left hand, I can pick my right hand off the floor. Don't walk all the way in, especially if you've never done this before. And I'm not walking all the way in if I was introducing you to do this, like if we were working together, more privately, or I was writing out a program for you. I wouldn't ask you to walk in this much. I would probably do a couple months of conditioning to get you to this point. So press through the hands, protract through the shoulders, take one foot up, and maybe this is the position right here, but I'm going to walk in just for a moment, and then I'm going to walk back out. So I'm leaning to the one hand, leaning to the opposite, okay? And then I'm coming down, and maybe you're squatting, maybe you're not doing more, but I'm going to do two more if you're up for it. So press through the hands. Index fingers are turned forward. Take the opposite leg up if you can. Walk in. Really push away, right? Keep the ribs in. Transfer the weight from one hand to the other. Really push, right? So you're protecting your wrists. And again, maybe you're back into a squat if you can't do a third. I'm going to do one more, okay? So push to the hands. Now, if I'm getting closer to the wall, this is where I'm wanting to keep the ribs in, so I'm not in this banana shape, right? So walk back out and come into a forward bend or a squat. So when I'm forward into a forward fold, I'm just forward, I'm hanging, and I'm bringing my hands underneath my feet. So just into a basic Hastasana. So again, super intense. Maybe you're not kicking up when I kick up later. Maybe you're going back to planks, right? All of it will lead again into getting up into this type of position, right? Your handstand. So my toes are up to the wrists, trying to bring my legs closer to my upper body, right? And then I'm going to slowly roll myself up to a standing position. So I'm standing, I'm going to take my feet out wide. I'm going to do some wide angle positions, but just stand for a couple of breaths and just see how you stand. So people don't really realize that the better you stand, the easier it is to handstand. So if I was really out of position in terms of the way that I stand, this is what it's going to look like when you're upside down. So you want to kind of know where your hips sit in space so that you can create, just take the arms overhead
Try to get the shoulders up to the ears. Really reach up through the arms. Right? Really get the shoulders up towards the ears here, the head. And then you can take the arms back down. So take your feet out into a wide stance. And with your feet out wide, just turn your feet out. And just move the weight into your right foot, into your left. Just to create some space in between your hips. Like I said, they really complement one another. So if it's especially with when you're relaxing in between sets of handstands, you can go more into dynamic stretching or positions, right, to complement your practice. So I'm going into the right foot. You don't have to sit as low as I am, right? I'm reaching for my left foot with my left hand to target the hamstring. If I'm reaching my arms forward in space, then I'm stretching out more of my back. You don't want to sit so low that the heel pops up, right? So press up. We're going to go back into the right side. So if I'm just conditioning your legs, I'm going to stay on the same side, right? I'm coming up. I'm sitting down. You don't have to sit super low, right? Coming up, coming down, coming back up. If you're yoga, right, we love sitting in positions, but that's not going to get you stronger. Coming up and down is what's going to get you stronger. So again, probably what you're going to need more of. Again, at some point it is good to sit low. So bring yourself up, going into the left foot. So when I go into the left foot, I could have my heel elevated, like on a book, something at that level. And then as I sit into it, trying to keep my body upright, and you'll see which side gives you more trouble in terms of your hips or your hamstrings. So push through the left foot, slowly, slowly. The eccentric is a big part of getting stronger. Power kicking up is when you accelerate to come up. That assimilates you kicking up, right? So slowly, slowly come down, press the thighs apart. Again, I could reach for the foot. So again, you're tired, you have the flexibility, you can sit low, bringing yourself back up. But just, again, know if you're more inclined to just stretch. If you're that type of person, again, you probably need more strength training, conditioning. Bring it up. And slowly come to the left side. Press it out. And then as you're sitting, depending on where you're tight, you're going to feel what's actually being exposed or spaced out. So push through the left foot, bring yourself up. Have a wide stance. So as you're in a wide stance, just enjoy pushing the legs apart. As you push out for 3, 5, 10 seconds, then you can start to hug in. And both will complement one another. Great to do on a soft surface like a mat, like a thick mat, or eventually if you're in a warmer climate on grass. So just push the thighs apart, get yourself to lift up nice and tall, and then toe heel the feet in a bit closer. And then when you step the feet back together, you're just back into a neutral position. So I'm going to come down on the hands. I will kick up a little bit. I'm not going to talk so much through it, so just usually do that. But it takes away from the aesthetics and the actual function of the handstand. So we're going to kick up in threes. I'll count, right? I'll kick up, and maybe you can't kick up all the way. It's okay. Big part of kicking up is keeping your shoulders over your hands. So if you can't kick up, if you videotaped it from the side, you'd see that your shoulders aren't forward enough. You don't want them excessively forward. This is what I'm talking about. So when you kick up, if your shoulders are here, it's very hard to kick up. Because once you get to that level, then you got to bring everything forward, and you may have to do it quite quickly. And that's a big part of why you lose your balance, or so you fall out to one side. So, and you don't want it too far forward. The times that you're bringing your shoulders forward is for pressing into handstands, but you don't need it to kick up into just
middle of the room handstand. Use the wall. The wall is great. The wall is good for conditioning like we did before, but it does kind of put you in not the best position. When your back is to the wall, it creates not the best line. So I'm not totally against it, but I see often, because that's usually how it's taught in yoga. It's partially why I think people can't get it, is because they don't do chest to wall enough, which we did earlier, right? So push through the hands. Again, protract through the shoulders. Remember, you're elevating your scapula. It's a strong position. And just be a bit playful. If you're really serious, be playful. And if you're not serious enough, get serious, right? Just because, it helps, right? What you're not using is really what you need. So push through the hands, round through the shoulders, and then I'm gonna kick up 3 times, but with my right leg. Right? And then I'm going to kick up a little bit with my left leg. And this is just to get you kind of used to kicking. So don't flail. Stay strong in your legs. Right? Bring the weight forward. So just to get used to coming up, and maybe coming up a little bit higher each time you do that. And then, it will build up better strength in the hands. And the balance, I was kind of in that L position. I've said this before. It's way more difficult to hold that position than the actual straight line. So if you're close to it, get your back leg, the leg that's the bottom leg. Not that you have to get it up quick, but if you get it up fast enough, it's much easier to balance, right? So it's going to get you into holding the position. And then when you're holding it, as you get to 3 seconds, people freak out. So just be patient, push, remember to stay in it. Try to stay a little bit longer. I'm going to try it one more time, just so that you have some experience with it. Again, it's okay to look past the hands, the fingertips, but get into more of the habit when you're kicking up. Try to look at either the knuckles of the hands, so not quite past the fingers, or even looking to the heel of the hand. Because eventually you don't want your head to be cocked forward in this type of position of a handstand. So press through the hands, round through the shoulders, really brace here. Bring the weight forward into the hands. And, just to give you an example of coming up, but maybe it didn't come up, and maybe you obviously didn't hold it that long, but it's just a matter of relaxing. And if I'm getting to the point, once you get past like 10 seconds, you might have to learn how to transfer the weight forward and back. So just come down on the hands. And what you're going to do is just keep the weight forward in the front of the hands and lift the heels of the hands off the floor. So not that this was the be-all, but just these heel lifts of the hands, some call them finger push-ups, is that you're lifting, slowly descending, but then you get real control and transferring the weight forward and back. Remember when I was talking about standing? So when you stand, you might have too much weight in your toes, you might have too much weight in your heels. So if you can begin to calibrate the weight in your hands, especially when you get to a long handstand or a longer handstand, like after 30 seconds or into the minute range, that's what really helps someone do that. So still stay in the hands. Turn the hands in again like we did earlier. Move the weight around, adjust the hands, the wrists. Right. Turn the hands back. Move the weight around. Good. And then just come into this toe stance. So sit back on the toes, sit back on the heels. So, it's a process. It can get really frustrating. So consistently do it for like 4 weeks. Maybe take a week off. Still do your mobility work for your shoulders, your hands, your wrists in the week that you take off. And then you can kind of get back into it. But, it does take some time. Like I said, if it's just strength, one day you do push-ups, the other day you do wall walks. Those are very different. The push-ups will help because the top of the push-up is the straight arm position. But walking up the wall and walking back is really, really great for conditioning. I don't want to just say women, but generally speaking, like a woman practitioner is going to struggle with the strength of it. So that's a very good way. I prefer that more than kicking up. But if you're doing a lot of kick-ups, right, that builds up a lot of time in this position where you can do it. I'm just going to do one more pushing exercise, just if you have it in you. And they're not like, they're a little bit more difficult. And the reason you'd want to do more, because in the world of yoga, like arm balances are really counterbalances. And they do build strength to some degree. But like I said, the bent arm pushing is more difficult to do. So like as much as you are doing your yoga, at least a couple times a week doing more bent arm strength, whether it be pulling or pushing, will help, in my opinion, help you more. So I'm just going to do some Pike Eccentrics. I'm not going to elevate my feet, but you could certainly do that, like on a block to start, then a chair. But this is more like handstand push-ups. But like I said, like the more difficult these positions are, you're going to get more conditioned where it'll get you to closer to doing that. Like it's more, again, more for conditioning reasons. So come into a down dog. So push to the hands, pull back, pedal the legs out, pedal it out. And what you're going to do, and I'm going to do it with you, is just a slow, so I'm going to make it really short. So I'm bringing my elbows are in, just like a push-up. Elbows are in, all these push-up lines, right, are the same. It's just you're bringing your head forward. But be careful so you don't crash down. If you find yourself pushing, where that you can't hold it, right, obviously come down on your knees. But keep your hips up. And you're going to bring think of bringing your face, your head, slow, and then bring your knees down, and then come down. We're going to do that a few more times, just the eccentric. But like I said, the eccentric will really help build up some strength for you. So go back up into a down dog, make it short. Right, elbows in, slow, knees down, and then down. And then one more time, I'm going to come up. I'm going to do that one more time. So coming up, the hips, coming forward, elbows in, push. Keep pushing the floor away from you. Push. Then bring the knees down. Bring the hands back. Bring the back of the hands, or the palms of the hands to the floor. And just peel it back a little bit. Lean into the hands. Right, just one more stretch for the hands. Bring the backs of the hands. We did these earlier. Just push through the hands. Bring the weight back in space if you need more of a stretch into the wrist and the forearm. Right, good. And then I'm going to come into a seated position just because we're on the knees. I'm going to end with a forward bend. You could be standing, you could be doing plow. So I'm going to come forward where my legs are forward. I'm going to grab my big toes. I'm going to get my armpits on top of my knees. I'm going to extend through my back. And then I'm walking my hips back in space. So back And to the point where I feel a decent stretch is where I'll stay, is where I start. Like I feel it, even though I could flatten out more, it's a pretty good stretch here. So think that your legs are lifting more into your chest. And then as you lift up, you'll feel more compression in the hip. You'll get more forward over the legs. Now, if you do want to stretch the hips back further, you can certainly do that. You can grab onto the tops of the feet or the outside of the feet. And then as I'm lifting, I'm going to grab the heels of my feet and I'm pushing my legs down from time to time as well, not just lifting my legs up. So I'm pushing my legs into the floor, right? And then I may get lower with time. And, you know, if I didn't have a lot of time, I would, you know, proactively push more, but back off. I get time and I want to be more passive or more like yin, something that you could do more in like the evening, I think is good. So take a couple deep breaths. And then when you come up, just bend the knees a little bit, lift the chest up, have the hands down, have the knees bent, pull the shoulders back in space, and lift the hips off the floor. So push into the floor, widen the shoulders, widen the back. You could have the head back if you wanted to. And then bringing the hips down. And you could sit in a seated position. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for today. Of course, if you have the time, rest, right? That's obviously really important. You know, say this was a really, really difficult class for you, right? It'll get easier with practice. But if it is, you know, difficult for you, then maybe your practice is a little bit lighter the next day. You know, you don't have to go really strong every day to benefit. But at least a couple times a week, I think, is really beneficial for so many different reasons. So let me know how the classes are going. I'm going to upload tips along the way for the month of February, some shorter videos. So if there's anything that you'd like me to make for yourself, I'm happy to do that. It helps support my channel, and I'm interested in providing content that supports you in practice. If you'd like to make a donation, all my information is on my website. It's jonwittyoga.com. If you'd like to work with me more online, whether I write out a program for you or we work together privately, you could reach out to me and we could set up something that could provide a better practice. You know, that's probably the best way to develop. I mean, these classes are good, but just doing more and more on your own, because, you know, there's a lot of time within the week, we progressively make it more difficult for you. You could have a very, very dynamic practice or life. It just, you know, when I work with people privately, it's very good in the therapeutic aspect, but it's limiting because that's just 1 hour, right? It's a good hour, right? But it's really not enough if you want to develop like an advanced practice. All right, stay well, stay safe, and hopefully I'll have you in class again soon. I have a class over the weekend, this weekend, and Sunday. All my classes are on my website. All right, take care.